Good morning to all of you. It's fantastic being here, not only at this conference, but here in South Africa, in Johannesburg, in August, the Women's Month. And here in this beautiful rainbow nation of yours, it's fantastic that we have this entire month dedicated to celebrating, commemorating, recalling, and remembering all of the good work, the great work that women have done, unsung women who have done so much for our economy, for the way the culture is, for our society, and for our workplaces. So today is a day in which we celebrate young women, old women, your sisters, your daughters, your grandmothers, cousins, colleagues, your best friend, everyone, and your mothers. So today is that day that we celebrate all of these women. Speaking of mothers, today is also the day, August 15th, that is the 73rd Independence Day of my country, India. Today is the 72nd anniversary of India regaining freedom from under the colonial rule. And so in India, we celebrate this by calling out the words Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram basically means, Mother, I bow to thee. And that's what it means. And you know, if I were to ask my kids, they'd translate it something like, Mom, you're cool. So that's what it would probably mean. So I invite you all to join me as we say, Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram. Thank you so much. So that is a celebration of India's independence, which is today. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you, Standard Bank. I'm also wearing your colors, blue, right? And thank you, Top Women. It's a privilege to be here. And you know what? That word, privilege, it's a loaded word. I'm going to talk to you about different kinds of privileges that exist. You have the earned privilege, something that people obtain by virtue of their hard work, by virtue of the fact that they have really worked up to be where they are. And then you have unearned privilege. You know, some people get ahead for no fault of theirs, for no effort of theirs. How have they got ahead? Why are they where they are? We don't know. It could be one of the isms that we spoke about, you know, in the previous he for she panel. It could be sexism. It could be heterosexism. It could be ableism. It could be ageism. It could be just in-group favoritism. So the fact is that some people get ahead for no fault of theirs, and they are actually like fish in water. Not fish out of water, mind you. Fish in water. Because the world that they inhabit, the world that they are part of is their world. A world that has been built for them, by them, of them. Now, I'm not saying it's men against women. I'm not saying it's different kinds of races against the others. I'm not saying all of that. But let me tell you that this is the case everywhere. If I were to look at a problem and think, oh my God, this is such a uniquely Indian problem, you know? And in the previous panel, I heard you mention that, I think it was Wendy who mentioned it, that, you know, is being loyal to your family actually being disloyal to your career? And when I heard that, that resonated with me. And I thought, oh my God, this is such an Indian thing. But then, come to think of it, it's an Indian thing. It's a Chinese thing, it's an African thing, it's a Japanese thing, it's an American thing. Where do you have a world where women are not penalized for not being career primary? So when we start speaking about the fact that we need all of this to go away, to some people, it seems like oppression. Right? Am I right? Yes. Thank you. So what happened? What did this sort of, what kind of a change did this bring about among corporates, specifically, Indian corporates? It's a man's world, and women have to fit in while still retaining the bulk of chores. We have something called the Chore Gap. We spoke about the gender pay gap, didn't we? We have something else called the gender chore gap. The distance or the gap between the extent of chores performed by men versus women at home. Am I right? Yes? Yes. So you have that gender chore gap, which is also a big contributor to the gender pay gap and also a contributor to the fact that you have unequal representation of women in the workplace. Yeah? So that path is loaded with biases, all types of unconscious biases. You have your affinity bias, you have your halo bias, you have your horn bias, you have, the social comparison bias, you have the entire dirty dozen, 12 different types of biases that women face every day. And then when we speak equality, how's the equality? It is like this. You all have heard of the Aesop's fable, right? Of the fox and the crane that invited, each other to lunch or dinner, right? And then you had the crane which prepared two different types of, or it was the fox which prepared two different types of bowls, carrying the same food. But the problem is that the crane could not have it because the bowl was meant to help the fox. So it was equality. Can you see that? The two bowls are the same. That's equality. But then does it help the crane? Does it help one of the parties? Does it? No, it doesn't. So here it is. This is equality. You have 3 stools on which 3 people of different heights are standing. And that's what equality is. When you say that I'm going to treat everybody without discrimination, that's right, theoretically. But practically, what happens? This is what happens. You see that it means that your equality does not translate into equal outcomes, right? So what did this actually result in? Round about 2000. And when I say 2000, there is actually a context to that, and I'll come to that in a bit. With reference to women's workforce participation in India, 48% of Indian women drop off mid-career under the age of 30 because it becomes unsustainable for them. Unable to make a successful re-entry, even if they do want to come back into the workplace. Even if they do wish to come back into the workplace, they are not able to really do it. And corporates are not open to women making choices different from career primary. So you have the 3 different types of women in the workplace. You have the career primary, which is the woman who will probably do all of the things that is required to stay in the workplace, to do well in the workplace, to be part of the workplace. She is career primary. And then you have the other set of women called the home primary. The home primary women, they are actually in the workplace not because they're passionate about it, but because they have to fulfill a need, some kind of a need. It could be economic, or it could just be that they have a painful mother-in-law or husband at home. Just saying. I'm just saying. Not that my husband's right here. I have a happy marriage. I'm not saying anything, right? Okay, right. So you have the home primary women who's just there in the workplace, probably temporarily, and then maybe once that need is taken care of, she will quit. And then you have this large group of women who are career and home, who want the career, but they also want the home, who want to have babies and raise them and do all of those things which makes you so uniquely feminine, and want to do all of that stuff, but still want to do gloriously in the workplace. And this gray area Saundarya, this group of women, career and home, who keep shifting between priorities, this represents almost 80% of the women, especially in India, and I'm sure it's the same over here as well. Right? So what happens then? When corporates are uncomfortable with the fact that women will take these decisions, which will kind of, always toy between priorities at home and priorities at work, then that discomfort leads to the corporates setting rules which actually, whether knowingly or inadvertently, shut out the women. So this is what happens. There is a downward spiral of poor women's workforce participation. And this is true not only of India, it is true of every developing country in the world. And it is true definitely of South Africa as well. What happens when you have low women's workforce participation? You have less per capita income. You have lesser development. Why? Because as the Honorable Minister pointed out in the talk before me, women are important consumers. Women create ecosystems which have various different types of development that happen side by side. So you have lesser development, you have lesser GDP, and the country as a whole loses because women are not sufficiently there in the workplace. Meanwhile, and this is a bit autobiographical, so I'll request you to bear with me as I do a little bit of a flashback and go back a few decades to speak about something personal. Somewhere in Chennai, a woman is angry. And why is she angry? She's angry because she attended an interview, and because she had taken a break in career of about 4 years, the person who interviewed her was very disappointed. And even though he was assessing her for a role for which she was absolutely perfect, notwithstanding her break, he could not just forgive the fact that she had chosen something other than career, and therefore, in order to sort of make sure that she knew that there was a price to be paid for taking breaks in career, he offered her a job that was almost at about 60% lower than her last paid job. So, that kind of made her really angry. And she wonders why her break is considered such a liability. Why is it used to twist her arm to accept a much lower pay? And her anger turns into reflection. Is there a social problem in the phenomena of women dropping off? Especially in India, is there a social problem? Is there something that's not just about the woman, not just about her family, not just about the educational institutions that she has come out of, but about the entire ecosystem which forces her to sort of drop off mid-career, just leaving everything and saying, this is too unsustainable for me? Is the woman the only loser of this? Is she the only one that does not benefit from the fact that she is no longer in the workplace? Is the ecosystem blind not to see this? The fact that women, large numbers of women will be career and home primary, that there will be these choices that women make all the time in order to ensure that their life just goes on, smoothly in the way that they want, and that they will make these choices, and that the corporate has to kind of see that this is what is about them. This is what a woman will do. This is how, her life will sort of progress. Yeah? So is the ecosystem kind of blind not to see this? And that's how the journey of my social entrepreneurship began. What is social entrepreneurship? They have this saying, this proverb, feed a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man fishing and you feed him for a lifetime. Am I right? Yeah. But you know what social entrepreneurship is about? It's not just about teaching the man how to fish. It's about changing the whole fishing industry. Just looking at, how are things? What's really happening? What can be changed? What are all those things that need to be pushed, that need to be brought to a sense of complete difference, a 360-degree change from what it was. From one point, you move completely to another point. So that was how my social enterprise, Avtar, was born. Today, I'm here. Avtar is 18 years old. We've completed 18 years in the space of developing women's careers. And the topic of my talk today is basically how social entrepreneurship can be that vehicle of change, that vehicle of ensuring that greater development happens, not only for women, but for the country as a whole. And I'm just going to share a few learnings of my own journey of being a woman entrepreneur, especially a social entrepreneur. So the social enterprise that I run, it's called Avtar. It looks at impact creation, not just revenue. We look at changing not just individuals, but the entire ecosystem. And we ensure that the changes are not just accepted, but welcomed and integrated completely into the system. Today, there are 3 organizations that I run. Avtar, which is India's premier diversity and inclusion consulting organization. We consult for over 300 of India's top organizations, top companies. We also work with several of the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies across India, and we build their diversity and inclusion strategy for them. We also work in the space of artificial intelligence, using artificial intelligence and big data to make sure that biases are removed from the whole selection process. We also work on this most special project called Project Putri. And Putri, in many Indian languages, means daughter. So Project Putri, it's about skilling India's underprivileged daughters. Children who belong, girl children who belong to below poverty line families, girl children who belong to families where mothers are domestic workers, mothers are daily wage laborers, mothers who are agriculture workers, and in many cases, the fathers are alcoholics or the fathers have very, very poor jobs. So as a family, they have a great deal of struggle in even reaching up to the 10th standard or the 12th standard. So that is Project Putri. So these are 3 of my enterprises. And what are those lessons that I have really learned? What are my key takeaways from being a social entrepreneur? Here is lesson number 1. When a truth is told, people appreciate. They agree. Yeah, this is true. Yes, we agree. But when you tell it with data, they not only appreciate, but they also act. And this holds true for all of us here in the audience. All of you who are aiming to push the agenda of diversity and inclusion in your own workplaces, who are aiming to make sure that women get greater representation for everything, even if it is about your own career, even if it's about making sure that your work gets noticed, make sure you have data. So when a truth is told, people appreciate, but when it is told with data, people act. So what have we done? We have used data to show the value of gender inclusion. We have used data to persuade more and more companies. In fact, one of the things that Avtar did when we started off in the year 2000 was to create a flagship report called Viewport year on year. And if you visit www.avtarinc.com, that's avtarinc.com, you will have under the resource pages a lot of data about what it means to have greater participation of women in the workplace, what it means to have more second career women, which is women who have taken breaks in career and who want to make that re-entry. So we used data, and when we speak the language of the corporates, which is data, numbers, quantifiable stuff, they immediately respond. So we used data to a large extent. Hence, my suggestion to all of you is please use data at whichever occasion, whatever situation that you may be. Numbers speak very, very powerfully. But along with numbers, please also learn how to tell a story. Because when you are able to do, this beautiful marriage of storytelling with numbers, then there's really no stopping you. Lesson number 2, when you want to change the ecosystem, begin with the greatest beneficiary. Usually, everybody thinks that when you want to change the ecosystem, you start off with, people in the periphery, you start off with key stakeholders and so on and so forth. No. When you want to change the ecosystem, start with who is going to benefit from it first. And in our case, in the case of Avtar, it was the woman, the Indian woman professional. So we began with her. We started training women on what I call ICP, intentional career pathing. How do you become intentional in your careers? How do you make sure that when you get on a career path, you are actually looking at your career as a game of chess and not as a game of snakes and ladders. So that is intentionality for you. And we began training thousands upon thousands of women on intentional career pathing. We started convincing organizations to have recruitment drives specifically for women. So we were able to convince the corporates that if they had recruitment drives that focused only on women, we'd be able to focus more on trying to put together the kind of skills, the kind of talent that they wanted from women and line them up so that the corporates would be able to hire them at one shot. We were able to place thousands upon thousands of women because we were able to show the corporates the value of having these recruitment drives. We helped the women with resume writing. We helped curate jobs for women. So you have jobs, and then you have jobs that are de-biased and that are now applicable for everybody. So if it is a de-biased job, then that means your job descriptions should have to be really looked at, read, seen, removed all those aspects which have an unconscious bias of some sort, and that's how you create curated jobs. Lesson number 3. If you want to sustain a social impact program, make it competitive and cool. Now, in a lot of cases, when you speak about social entrepreneurship, when you speak about social impact, the thought is that, it's very dry, dearie, it's for these very sad-faced people. It's something with very low market and so on. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Social enterprise and social entrepreneurship is exciting. It's sexy. It's wonderful. And it's because you make it so. If we make it cool, if we make it competitive, then that's what is going to, gain the kind of attention that we want it to get. What did we do? We tied up with this organization called Working Mother of the US. They are one of the world's greatest gender champions in the US, and they have been running gender change programs for about 35 years now. And they have actually seen the way US has transformed in its women's workforce participation by the very same use of data that I mentioned to you before. So we tied up with them and we created the Best Companies for Women in India initiative, where great companies, wonderful companies, well-intentioned companies, companies which want, gender inclusion to be an important thing, companies which wear gender inclusion on their sleeve, companies like Standard Bank. These organizations sort of compete with each other, not for ranking, because we are inclusive. It is an alphabetical listing of the top 100 employers for women in India. So when we pioneered this has caused so much of transformation in the Indian workplace that today, every year, we are kind of raising the bar. We are ensuring that more and more organizations are able to see the benefit of women's workforce participation. And what's actually the biggest benefit of this is, what was once considered very esoteric, very exotic, is actually becoming par for the course. It's just becoming hygiene. For instance, flexibility. Flexibility and flexible working about 5, 8, 10 years ago was considered to be something that only the most privileged women, again, mind you, I'm using the word privilege very consciously, only the most privileged women could actually afford to obtain flexibility. But today, with the advent of the best companies for women in India, we have everyone, all the organizations that participate, and it's led to the benefit of thousands upon thousands of women who actually enjoy flexibility in their work and life integration. So, how do we negate the effect of unearned privilege? By creating allies. I heard the CMO of Standard Bank in the He for She panel before, and it was fantastic hearing you when you spoke about so many of the things that have to be done in order to ensure that gender equity is there. Not just equality, mind you, but equity, right? And so we need allies. That's the kind of allies that we need. We need a lot of sensitization. We need, again, to quote you, you spoke about the value of humor and how certain jokes should absolutely be forbidden in the room. And that's what sensitization is all about, right? And this. So do you need equality or do you need equity? Equity is different enablers for different people. Not everybody gets the same enabler, because our journeys are different. So there is a wide sort of range of enablers which people can use because they feel that, it's important for them to use that particular enabler to go where they wish to go. So equity always trumps equality. And by consistently proving through different methods, we actually are able to negate the effect of unearned privilege by focusing more on equity rather than equality. So, ladies and gentlemen, the result today of Avtar's work in the past 18 years is here. The number of women impacted by us so far is about 3.5 lakh. That's about close to about 35 million women. Number of companies impacted is about 300. Number of workshops, about 500 plus workshops. Number of jobs that we have created, about 40,000 jobs. And the income generated by the women who have actually gotten back into the workplace through the effect of Avtar is almost about 50 million USD. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So that's Avtar for you. It's considered India's #1 company for women's careers, and all because one woman got very angry when she had to take a 60% pay cut long, long ago. Yes, thank you. So, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you. I really hope that you have a fantastic conference. I'm off sightseeing, by the way. So I'm going to be going out and seeing your beautiful city today. It was wonderful and fantastic sharing thoughts, with all of you. I wish each and every one of you an intentional career ahead, and may we rock as women. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.